My name is Eddie Adams. I'm the moderator with my co-host Amélie Cousin of this first of three UDN UIA webinars. Great to have you with us. I can see at the moment we've got about 450 people on this meeting so far, and the numbers are clocking up, so welcome. This morning in this first of our three sessions, we will be focusing on the achievements of the Urban Innovative Actions Initiative. We've had a fantastic response to these sessions. Sadly, of course, we cannot meet face-to-face yet, although we look forward to when we will be able to do that again. But we've designed as interactive a session as we can for you today. We want you to be able to actively participate, to be involved in the session. I'll be telling you shortly how you can do that. If we jump into the next slide, keep yourselves muted at all times. Use the chat box on the side for comments and questions. So that if I'm sure we're all doing hundreds of these all the time now, but just in case this is your first ever webinar, you have a chat box down the side of your screen, a little icon on the bottom which can open the chat box. If you've got questions, if you have comments, if you have content you would like to paste and share, that's where to put it. We'll be hoping to have a lively exchange in the chat box. We'll be looking for your questions, bringing them in and connecting them to our speakers. We ask you to be reactive to polls or any of the tools we'll be using to get your thoughts on things. One little tip in WebEx, which is a little bit strange, you have to make sure that the everyone button is the one that you click on, otherwise it doesn't go to the entire audience. So if you want to reach our 500 plus participants who are currently clocking onto this call, then just click the everyone button and put your comment into the paste bar. In my old life, this is normally where I tell you about the fire escape, the fire drills, and where the toilets are. You know where the toilets are better than I do, so I don't have to do that today. So let's jump into the program. I'm going to quickly just go through how this is going to look. So we've got two blocks. In the first block, we'll be setting the scene shortly with Norman Poppins from DG Regio, also with Anne Wetzel from the Hauts-de-France region, which is the entrusted entity for UIA. Amélie, my co-host, will then be checking who's in the room, getting a sense of who's with us this morning on the call. Tim Caulfield, director at UIA, who many of you will know, will then be just giving us the big picture from the program, telling us at a glance how things have been since UIA kicked off 5 calls ago. It seems like a long time ago now, but a lot of water under the bridge. Tim's going to give us the headlines. We're then going to break into 4 parallel sessions, a chance to dive a bit more deeply into what UIA cities have been doing to lift the lid on some of those experiences. We have 4 fantastic moderators, all UIA experts, looking at social, greener, smarter and more connected. Those are, of course, 4 of the 5 new policy objectives. So that's just before the break. After the break, our attention shifts to knowledge management strategy and how we can best package, utilize, share this rich learning and experience that's coming from the UIA work so far. We'll have Laura Collini, first of all, talking about the work that Arbact and UIA have done together around housing, the right to housing, and then Irakli Stamos from UIA team will be joining us to talk about the innovation for mobility work, just to give us an insight into some of those knowledge management approaches. And then we're going to wrap up very quickly, tell you what happens next in webinar 2, which is same time, same place next week. And then we'll be closing at 12:30. So in a nutshell, that's our program for this morning. If you want to tweet, please tell the world what we're doing. It's #UDN Webinars. So other people can join the conversation. I see we've now got 552 people with us. Without further ado, we're going to jump into the next slide. And I'm delighted to welcome Norman Poppins, the Deputy Director General for Regional and Urban Policy of the European Commission, and also Anne Wetzel to help us set the scene for this morning's session. Norman's, welcome, great to see you. Do you want to pop your camera on? I'll close mine and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. I hope you all can hear and see me. think it is about 1 year now since all of us, most of us, met in the beautiful Portuguese city of Porto within the frame of our cities forum, and we had very lively discussions, and we, I think, also kicked off a discussion on the future of different instruments that we have under the cohesion policy and elsewhere from the EU to support our cities. We had more than 1,600 registrations already for three webinars that are following now and that are kicking off this year. Now, unfortunately, situation has dramatically changed. We would have loved to see you all somewhere physically, but we need to go now for the virtual events. It has proven to be somewhat also an efficiency gain and possibility for all of us to participate easier, but I think after 1 year we might as well say that we all miss a little bit of our informal discussions and informal interactions that normally happen during the physical events. At the same time, even if COVID pandemic has completely changed the context of our exchanges in the past, putting, of course, in forefront the necessity to support the resilience of our health systems, as well as support our small and medium-sized enterprises and unemployment schemes to, fight these disruptive events. And still we have problems which we have been discussing all the time, and even if we need to focus on the exit from the crisis and recovery plans, we need to remember that the future will be there only if we invest into it. So this issues that are linked to the problematics that we have discussed in the past for our cities, for our urban areas, but also for all territories in the EU still remain there. So we need to be very serious also about starting to think about the new normal, for me it is clearly that this green and digital transition should be our priority. So everything that is linked to the investing into the making our cities greener, more environmentally friendly, air quality, urban mobility with transport problems, which is one of the bottlenecks also for the Green Deal, I think. They are all very important. We also have to think, of course, about the inclusive subjects of inclusion, and it's not just about health, resilience, which I mentioned already. It is all the other issues that we have discussed. For example, also very important housing initiatives. We've discussed a lot about housing, and I will in the end say a few words about the new initiative from the Commission. We should be proud of what UIA has achieved. I think we have conducted studies and assessments. There is a UIA midterm assessment study, which will be published very soon. We have 86 projects funded out of more than 1,100 applications, and it's 368.5 million which are committed to these projects. It seems like maybe not such a big amount if you compare to the whole cohesion policy envelope, but I think it is very important because the value added of this instrument has proven very, very well. First of all, the cities had great interest, which is shown by the number of applications in our project calls, and we start to see also the first results materializing from these concrete projects. Of course, none of that would have been possible without our entrusted entity. I wanted to pass special gratitude to Anne Wetzel and her team, Région Hauts-de-France, for working with all of us, and also now for working with us to see how we can best share the results and the knowledge that we have gained in these projects under the UIA, to make sure that it's not just a benefit to happy few who have received funding, but that it serves the whole EU urban community. So thank you, Anne, and to your team. But more, of course, I want to thank everybody for being with us, for making this instrument work. It was not for granted 7 years ago. when we started it, and now we also think about the future of it as part of the new European Urban Initiative. And of course, the links, as I said, to our mainstream programs. I'm very happy to see that many of you work in our mainstream programs, sort of you are our cohesion policy stakeholders. And it's very important that in our mainstream programs, because now we are also conducting the negotiations, we know we should be also very happy that the co-legislators have even increased the earmarking, which has to go directly to support urban the integrated development strategies. That is very good, but I think we should really build on what we have achieved under the UIA instrument, and really inspire also for our mainstream programs when we where we have a lot of funding available to support our cities, urban areas, but also more and more we talk, of course, about urban-rural linkages supporting cooperation under the functional territories. This is all possible from our mainstream programs. I'm also very happy to see that our URBAC program is working with us very closely. We see the first from this cooperation, the UIA pilot transfer mechanism is materializing. Again, we hope that this will allow to engage all cities around the EU to see what from these UIA projects can be taken further and then replicate this innovation outside their original local contexts. Of course, as I said, we need to think about future. Not everything has been perfect. Nobody is perfect. And the assessment study offers us a number of avenues for reflection on which we need to concentrate. So we, I think, need to better prioritize the project calls, the types of innovation that we are targeting. Of course, we need to strengthen the focus on sustainability as well as on transferability, and the relevance, I think, and links to cohesion policy and also other policies defined at the EU level as priority, but hopefully with a clear link to our to impact on our territories and our urban areas. We are committed to have this new instrument, which I already mentioned, the European Urban Initiative, up and running in 2022. We have started dialogue with all of you under the Cities Forum. Also, we have an expert group which has been contributing to setting up of this instrument with all relevant stakeholders at different levels of governance, national, regional, urban levels, managing authorities, NGOs, you name it. We are very happy about this cooperation. We think that this new initiative, which will incorporate reintroduced as a separate program with a clear mandate, of course, to work on synergies and complementarities between the two, the URBAC and the EUI, and this is, I think, our key guiding light. We're also happy to see the new Leipzig Charter endorsed by all. It is our blueprint, I think, for everybody towards shaping our cities under these three big lines: green, just, and productive city. And of course, we are now very happy to see that it is fully accepted that the new policy objective, policy 5, is there in our regulations. We've been working already with many of you, put substance into this, so hopefully this policy objective, Europe closer to citizens, which is place-based and integrated, will help us also to bring in this into our thematic concentration and the work under thematic priorities. So everything is in place now. All ingredients are in place. We still need to formally wait for regulations to be adopted, but I thank you for the work, and I think we are well placed to start this year with optimism, of course, provided that the crisis caused by COVID ends. I will finish in really very few minutes. I don't know what the timing is counted. I still have 5 minutes, right? I want to mention a few of the things that we've been contemplating in the European Commission to make sure that when we talk also about urban areas, we start to maybe better prioritize, to come up with and we are really transfixed on getting out of the crisis. You know that very well. We have a COVID response investment initiative, we have React EU, we have recovery and resilience facility, which we need to constantly stay on. Yes, they are instruments mostly national. Our stakeholders are engaged because one of our requirements is that the regional urban authorities are consulted for these instruments. Because there is a possibility to invest from these instruments. As always, we say the broad mobilization and engagement of all stakeholders is important for all these instruments. We need to find common solutions. We also have come up with some new ideas. You might have heard about the new European Bauhaus initiative, which we have launched on the 18th of January. I think it's a good initiative. We can, of course, fight about the name, and I think we will probably come up with something different. But in fact, what I see that this initiative is something which tries to incorporate both the urban planning side, the architects, designers, as well as scientists, with the citizens. So it is about involvement of all of them and working together under this urban planning or design angle for the Green Deal. So translating this and linking this cooperation to the Green Deal into new forms of interventions on the urban space where all disciplines from art to science would really offer their best and come together under this initiative, and showing that actually it can work together, the affordable housing with the new design, culture, beauty, but also the Green Deal, the use of recyclable materials, bio, and so on. So I think this is our attempt. This is why I'm very optimistic about this initiative. I really think we should embrace it, and we will try to see how we can also support it in future from our instruments. You will have a presentation from our colleagues from Joint Research Center on their thoughts about what this initiative means, what is the content of it. So again, please be active. I think this is probably one of the initiatives we want to support in future as well under our European Urban Initiative. There are many other initiatives which are coming up. I mentioned, I think, affordable housing initiative, which we will start to discuss. Many other initiatives which are there. We have cities mission under the Horizon Europe program. Again, I think it's important that we get engaged, we discuss it with you. We see also that some themes are emerging as even more important. We do talk about support to health systems also in our urban areas. I think most of the important hospitals are located in cities. We also need to think about the urban mobility again and to see how we will reshape our thinking in that area. Obviously, support to tourism, cultural heritage becomes very important because these are the fields that have suffered the most from the pandemics, and so on and so forth. So I think I would really hope that also during these discussions, you would bring in your ideas how some of these issues can also better be addressed and tackled through our cooperation within this urban, part of our policy, but most likely also, of course, linking it to concrete programs that we will be having. We need to finalize all of these programs this year, hopefully, and we rely also on your inputs and also your indications on what, as a European Commission, we can help more or better or change the way that we work. I think it's 26 seconds left, so I'm very much on time this morning. You see the beauty of virtual work, probably. But thank you for listening to me. I wish you very, very good all three meetings, and we are here for you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Norman. It's great to see you. We got 99% of your content really clearly, and you helped us. You signaled some of the things that we're going to be talking about. One is this big transition we're on, this green digital, this journey, the impact of the technology stuff, the efficiencies there, but also the human things we lose, that interactivity. And when we're talking about innovation, that creativity sometimes is harder to catalyze on screen. I'm sure we'll talk about these things. You also refer to EUI and the changing kind of ecosystem. We'll be talking about that in our third webinar when we look ahead at what's coming next and where UIA fits with that. And then finally, you also picked up really helpfully on this whole question of mainstreaming, scaling, how we kind of maximize the impact of these key lessons, which we'll be talking about in session 2 when we look at the assessment of UIA and also really having this bigger conversation about mainstreaming. So Norman, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for helping us get started. We're going to jump now from Brussels to Lille. I'm going to ask Anne Wetzel, Director of the Hauts-de-France region. Many of you will know Anne through her role as a UIA entrusted entity lead. So Anne, if you could pop your camera on, I will switch mine off. Great to see you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and a really warm welcome from Lille, from my side, from the Hauts-de-France region. I will just have some short comments to look back in the past and to, of course, then say some words about the future. Looking back, we started the UIA initiative in 2015 with the Commission, and we had 2 key ambitions. It was first to innovate and to test with the cities at a real scale new solutions to urban challenges. And also, second challenge, to upscale and transfer the most successful experiences to other urban realities across Europe. And we started from the scratch. And some years later, we are here and at a key crossroad of the delivery cycle, because we have now 5 calls with so much interest, as Poppins said, from all around Europe, and 86 projects running. It was a fantastic journey, a challenging one, and we have realized so many things delivered. And the first projects are now completed, 19 of them at the site. The first results are delivered, and they have a direct impact on the people's well-being. And I think this is really important to stress. We have now innovative approaches validated, implementing, and also the possibility to upscale and sustain the experience of the UIA cities. Norman Poppins said it in his speech. We are challenged by something completely different with this COVID crisis. And I must say, cities are playing a central role in it because they have to adapt, respond to the pandemic, and find new solutions, new ways of working, and adapt. And this is innovate also, and this is something we do with the UIA, and find solutions, invent new models, reinvent our future, and build back better. And so some words on the future, because we have implemented innovative urban solutions in a lot of cities. There's now a lot of knowledge, thematic and operational one. There's inspiring design and implementation going on. And now we have to ask ourselves how to share this learning. There's, Norman Poppins said it, the UIA knowledge management strategy, and we will hear about it more in the webinar soon. There's also the issue of mainstreaming the UIA practices to upscale the funding for UIA projects, and also to support good projects that we could not support by UIA, because we have not enough funds to do everything, but that could be a solution for them. And so to help managing authorities to deliver new solutions and the future urban dimension of the cohesion policy. Because the knowledge management strategy is a test bed for common priorities, for dissemination in the cities, and to invent also new transfer mechanism. There is a transition of the UIA to the European Urban Initiative. And I think it's so important that we all work together. There are the UIA cities, there are the experts, there's the Cohesion Policy, there's Urbact, there's the Urban Agenda, there are the important European networks, Eurocities, CMR, and so on. And we have to make this all work together to launch the new initiative. And a concrete meaning of this European urban family. And this will be a big issue for us, but we are looking forward also because we have the capacity to work all together to invent the new urban landscape, always moving, and a lot of input and new solutions we can build on. The Hauts-de-France region is very interested in continuing the journey and the adventure with the Commission in a really good partnership, and other partners, of course, too, to implement the new initiative in the most effective possible way. We keep all this in mind, and I wish you really fruitful conversations, debates in the 3 webinars, and I'm really looking forward to the results of the discussions. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Anne. Again, that concludes our setting of the scene. As Anne mentioned, lots of UIA projects in the first wave have completed. We'll have a chance shortly to dive into some of those projects and to hear from the ground what cities are doing, what they're learning, what they're sharing. So that's coming up shortly. Before that, I can see that people are sharing stuff in the chat bar. Fantastic. Norma's mentioned the new European Bauhaus. We posted the link to that there. Please keep your conversations going. Any questions or comments you have, that's where to put them. But for now, let's go out to the floor. This is one of these conversations where there's probably as much experience in the room outside than there is on the stage. I'm going to bring in my colleague Amélie Cousin from UIA, who's going to lead us with the polls. Amélie, do you want to pop your camera on? And we can ask Vasilis to join us to launch the polls, and we can find out who's in our audience this morning.
Yeah, hi, then thanks, Teddy. Good morning, everybody. I'm really happy to be joining you all. We are now 44 participants from all across the European Union. I'm going to be the co-moderator for this series of 3 webinars, and today my main job is to watch the chat for your comments and questions. So please use the chat on the right-hand bar of the WebEx screen, and feel free to share your views. Right now, so as Eddie said, we finger crossed, we are going to start with finding out who's in the room. So get involved with the poll, which is in the right side of the screen. We are asking you now the first question, which is what kind of organization do you represent? There's a lot of different answers, so please put in yours. Click on one of those. You have actually 1 minute left to do it. So are you a managing authority, intermediate body or EU funds? Are you a national ministry or agency, city authority, regional government? Please put in your answer. The clock is still running. 20 seconds left. Please put your answer. We will soon switch to the results. Okay, let's switch to the results now. It seems that the biggest response group is you are coming from city authority. It's, I mean, exactly what we can expect for a UDN UIA webinar. Then we have 10% of the participants working for university or research body, but also 30% of people who are not coming from one of these organizations. Interesting. And Eddie, do you have any particular comment or reflection?
No, I just invite everyone to jump in, because I think we've got 650 just about on the call. So for this next question, which Amelie's going to share with you, just jump in, participate, have a go, because we'd love to know, and it really helps the speakers to understand who's in the room. So should we show the next question, Amelie?
Yeah, sure. Let's launch the second question. So please answer to the poll. We would like actually to know how familiar you are with UIA. So are you very familiar, quite familiar, without being directly involved? Or do you know, you don't know much about it and you are here to learn more about UIA? And maybe you cannot find your answer there, so maybe you are in the wrong webinar. But we hope that you will stay with us if that's the case. So 20 seconds more for you as participants to put your answer.
So we're going to be having some in the breakouts, helpful for our city speakers to know your level of knowledge already, because it means they can position and pick content. I think we send you videos in advance, so you will have seen some material from the cities who are in those workshops. So even if you've had no involvement at all really with UIA, you should have a bit more knowledge than when you started, but it's still useful for us to know, whether you're a super expert or whether you're coming in for the first time. So this is a really key question for us.
Okay. Let's end the poll and look at the results now. Okay. Great. So, yeah, we have, it's actually, we have half of the respondents saying that they are familiar, quite familiar and very familiar, and the other half, if I may say, that they don't know much about UIA, which is good, because you will know everything with this webinar. And as Eddie just reminded you, you got a preparatory package with a lot of information also on UIA. But yeah, the objective of this webinar is to give you information on UIA for you to get to know more. So that's great. Maybe let's go to the final poll.
Yeah.
In this poll, we want to know more about your expectation for this webinar. So share with us what you expect. Do you want to share your knowledge and experience? Do you want to learn from other experience? Or maybe you are there to find more about UIA. So for 33% of the participants responding to the previous poll, it was, I think this is the case. Or would you like to build your networks? It can also be all of the answers I just mentioned, or it can be any other. So if that's the case, feel free to share your expectation in the chat. Please submit your answer. Once again, you have 1 minute to answer.
Okay, so interesting. I can see in the poll in the chat bar, someone said they want to know more about the difference between UIA1 and UIA2. So in our third session, we'll be having a forward-looking future orientation. We'll be talking a bit more there about what we've learned, how things are evolving, what the future looks like. So stay with us, Chiara, and we'll be picking up on that. Good to see Adele from Urbac joining us and pasting some material on what Norman's mentioned, this new collaborative initiative to look to transfer some of the lessons from the first round of UIA cities. So that's thanks for sharing that link, Adele. Good to see Amalia Zappu from Athens joining us. Great to have you with us, Amalia. And we look forward to your contributions and the discussions which are coming up. In the meantime, I think we've got the answers to the polls, Amalie.
Yeah, we have the results of the poll. So good to see that, yeah, 25% of the respondents want to find out more about UIA. So as I said, it's linked to the previous answers of the poll. You want to also learn from others' experience. Great, because you will have this opportunity in the breakout sessions with the cities and the UIA cities. And there's others answers. So let me open the chat. Someone wants to learn how to be successful. I guess you mean to be successful in submitting a UIA application. Get inspiration or to be successful for your project and to implement innovation on your territory. Get inspiration for possible synergies. Good. Yeah, there's a lot of comments in the chat. So I hand over to you, Eddie. Give us this poll. Give us a good picture of the audience. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Emily. Fantastic. I should have mentioned earlier, we are recording this session, and we will be recording the breakout session. So, there's a chance to share this with colleagues who are not able to join us. I'll just remind you also, we have the hashtag UDN webinars. If you want to tweet or share what's happening on social media, we're a little bit behind schedule, so I'm going to jump ahead. Good that 25% of you said you were here to find out more about the UIA, because our next and final kind of scene setter is Tim Caulfield, Director of the UIA Initiative, who's going to be giving us just a big picture summary of the very kind of incredible roller coaster journey that UIA has been on in the past few years. Some headlines just to help us understand the pattern, the pictures, some of the key messages, and that will help us in our final bit of scene setting before we then jump into the breakouts. Again, as usual, I'm going to switch off my microphone and my camera. Tim, if you can pop your camera on. Great to have you with us. The floor is yours, and you've got an interesting set of slides to share with us, I think.
Yes, thank you, Eddie. Good morning, everybody, as well. It's nice to see so many people are attending. Also nice to see people who don't know much about the initiative as well. And hopefully this will give people an understanding of what we've had at the initiative, but also in terms of where we're going in the future. We actually started up, as you might have heard from Norman and Anne, 5 years ago. And we didn't have anything. We didn't actually, when we started up, we didn't have any tables, we didn't have any chairs, we didn't have any computers. So it's really a quick startup, really putting things in place. And also, as our project's kind of innovating in terms of how we do things as well, putting the rules in place to help cities apply to us, but also help cities in their implementation of their new ideas, the new solutions, as you say. So we've come on a journey. We've actually achieved quite a lot in that journey as well. And as you will see a bit later, we've got 86 projects supported and over 1,000 applications that have been delivered through UIA. Just turning into why we were set up, regarding the main objectives. We're obviously part of the Cohesion Policy, part of the ERDF regulation. We're there to test new solutions, address issues related to sustainable urban development that are relevant at EU level. We're there to help projects take a risk, do something different, do something new that's not actually happened before in the European Union. Perhaps take inspiration from elsewhere, from things that are already going on, but really go to that level, go to that next step, that next level, to do something different, to innovate. So we've got the 86 projects. Part of the next steps as well is to the other objective that we have is to draw lessons from these projects, draw lessons from the innovation that has happened in these projects, and share that knowledge with other urban authorities across Europe. So also not just having the projects in themselves, delivering the innovation for their own cities, but ensuring that other cities across the European Union can actually benefit from the knowledge that has been collated from what's happened in their implementation. Go to the next slide, please. In terms of what we support projects that are measurable. I talked about risk. We shouldn't be afraid that projects actually fail, and that's part of innovation. Can they actually deliver what they seek to achieve? And therefore, they have to have a measurement within that. So they should have their indicators, their results. We should be able to see what they're achieving and how they're achieving it. Should be sustainable. I think Norman's related to these, but also the three other: the sustainability, the scalability, and the transferability of these innovations. They are relevant across the European Union, so we need to ensure that others actually benefit from them. And also, you'll see a bit further in the slides, these are collaborative projects. They're led by the urban authorities, but there are a lot of partners within our projects, from public, private, not-for-profit organisations, universities, research institutions, etc. So they're very, very much a collaborative process. And it's not necessarily always the urban authority that has the most amount of money that actually leads on the development, but the urban authority should actually be the policy lead. It's actually delivering something regarding their policy in the local area. These topics are linked, these projects are also linked to the topics of the European Urban Agenda set out in the Pact of Amsterdam. So there are a number of topics, a number of calls that we've had actually delivering against these challenges, these urban challenges set at a European level. And these calls are at EU level. So we haven't actually targeted geographical areas with our calls. They're very much a European call level that are relevant at European level. When we've always presented in the past, what we look to our projects is having this absolute innovation. So not necessarily just innovation at a local level, but it's innovation at a European scale. And then finally, we've tried to set up a mechanism, or the Commission has tried to set up a mechanism that actually helps in risk, helps in innovation. So projects get up to 5 million ERDF, so they can really deliver something that's concrete. They get advance payments, so again, helping politicians, decision makers take a risk. And they also get 80% of funding too. So 80% up to 80% of the actual overall funding for the project. So quite a high level of intervention that the Commission is giving, the European Union is giving to projects to enable that risk. And then we've got 3 years implementation and 1 year of knowledge transfer and closure of the project. Go to the next slide. So where are we today? As Norman has highlighted, there's 1,167 projects that have been submitted, and we've actually enabled the whole of the member states, 26 member states, to submit a project to us, and we've tackled 14 topics of the urban agenda. We've committed, and this includes technical assistance, obviously, 372 million euros, with 86 projects being supported. This is actually a 7% success rate regarding the amount of projects that have been submitted to us. So it has been a very, very competitive process, an application process for projects to actually get supported through UIA. And the next slide just gives us an overview of where our projects are within the European Union, and also the topics. So you've got the 14 topics. They're actually spread now, as you can see. At the very start, it was more towards the western side of Europe, but now, over the course of the 5 calls, we've got more and more projects being delivered across the European Union. You've got a number of clusters, maybe that's in Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, Belgium, but really, we have been able to spread our wings and go across the European Union. Next slide, please. And this just gives you an overview about the number of projects that were submitted per topic, as well as those that we funded. And what you can see here, obviously, is a correlation between the ones that have had the most submissions to the number that we've actually funded. You've got jobs and skills, urban poverty, circular economy. We've actually had 2 calls for proposals for those 3, which is the reasoning why perhaps there's more than others. And then you can see the correlation at the underneath with the urban poverty at 11, jobs and skills at 10, and circular economy at 9 projects that we've supported. What is actually also quite interesting, though, if you go down 1, is culture and cultural heritage. And this was actually last call that we had, the Call 5, which actually had the least amount of money, but you can see the real demand from cities across Europe regarding this theme. 105 applications that have been submitted on that. Obviously, we didn't have as much money as previously, so a little bit less, 6 were supported than others. And then another one, energy transition. We had a lot of projects in the first call on this, but not many were funded. Does this give you kind of where innovation, or the proposals against those funded, where the innovation lies and what topic the innovation lies, and also the demand in terms of innovation across the European Union that we can see through those supported and those actually submitted to us. And then finally, just on this slide, there's 2 topics that might not have had as many applications, but they've had applications, but not necessarily as many funded, is urban security, where we've got 3, but this is actually a challenge that actually was brought up during the urban initiative. It shows the flexibility of the UIA. We could actually tackle a topic that wasn't necessarily a mainstream topic. So we've got 3 under that. That came out of the terrorism issues that we had actually before COVID. And also migrants and refugees. This again, not maybe a mainstream topic for cohesion policy, but through the flexibility of UIA, we were actually able to fund quite a few projects under this theme to support, again, a topical issue at the time, 2015, 2016. We'll go to the next slide. And how do we get here? I mean, this gives you an overview of the member states and who have applied to us, and the member states that applied the most. Here, what you can say of Italy and Spain have actually applied near enough with half of the proposals that we've received. It's actually, if you look at other programs, it's not really exceptional, but it just goes to show that Italy and Spain have a good project development within their countries, and able to produce projects, but also able to produce good projects that, as you saw on the previous slide, actually have been funded the most as well in these areas, as you can see on the left graphic there. Then we've got Greece, Spain, Portugal, Belgium, Germany, and the Netherlands. 19 member states have been funded through us. So even though we've had a lot from perhaps the more Western areas, 19 member states have been funded, as I said previously, in terms of the geographical coverage across the EU. What is interesting, again, when I put figures on this, is that the success rates actually has been higher in some of the Central Eastern European countries. So, for example, you've got Slovakia that had 25% success rate, so they actually only submitted 4 projects to us. They've got 1 project that is being supported. They've got Bulgaria as well, 14% success rate, Hungary 11% success rate. So what you can see from that is that innovation is not just in certain parts of Europe, it's across Europe as a whole. Next slide, please. And here gives you the funding. As Norman's pointed out at the very start, there's around 368.5 million euros that we've committed this to actually projects. Average size of projects, 4.1 million euros. Maximum that we've given to a project is 5 million euros ERDF, and minimum is 2 million. So actually these are concrete projects delivering concrete results on the ground. A lot of projects have infrastructure and equipment attached to them. And we've actually hit the kind of urban fabric of the EU as well, with 55% of projects delivering in cities that are less than 250,000. But we've also had larger cities, so 19% of our projects have gone to cities that are over 1 million inhabitants. And then regarding the partnerships, we've had 99 EU cities. So we've had 86 projects, but some projects have had 2 cities actually working together, 2 areas working together in those projects, which is why there's more regarding the amounts of projects we've had. With 746 projects, again, a real collaborative approach. 8.6 partners per project, and you can see here the kind of quadruple helix in terms of there's the higher education, universities, public, private sector as well as not-for-profit sector. And again, what is interesting is you can see you've got high private sector, which again might not be as mainstream as through the mainstream programs. So what our initiative has brought is quite a high private sector input within these projects, also related to the fact that state aid was not relevant to the EIDF funding, which is again the flexibility we had to deliver innovation within the cities. And then the next slide, this just gives you an overview of what we funded. And this comes out of the midterm assessment, which gives a good overview of the diversity of innovations that we've had, the service innovations, the use of technology to innovate, social, financial, and governance innovations, obviously linked to the outputs, the new services, the products and processes, the technology platforms that we've had, infrastructure and equipment, citizen and business outputs, as well as partnership and governance outputs. So a good diverse amount of outputs that is actually through the midterm assessment, you see the typology of these comes out that also perhaps can be used for the future. Also, the midterm assessment came out and said that most of the core innovations have the potential to be sustained. It's very important for UIA and for the future. Also that the innovations can be scaled up, and they are being scaled up at city level, regional level. And we want to also go now further to ensure that there's a replication across the European Union to other cities in the European Union. And then what next? So next slide. Knowledge. And this is, as I said, at the very start, the second objective. We want to ensure that the 86 projects that we've captured, the knowledge that's coming out of them, the breadth of thematic and operational knowledge that's coming out of them, is now transferred, is now taken up by others across the European Union. Amelie will speak a bit later regarding our knowledge management strategy, a structured approach to helping us do this. And also we rely on partners to help us as well. And then thereafter the new EUI. So not just having UIA this period, but also continuing kind of the mainstreaming of the knowledge that's been captured this period into the next period. So finally, thank you. Shame we couldn't meet, obviously, this time around, but I hope we can meet sometime very soon in the future. And therefore, take care and hope you have an interesting and very thoughtful discussions over the next few webinars.
Thanks a lot, Tim. Fantastic. And you've kind of triggered a whole range of things. The chat bar has kind of exploded with comments, observations, and thoughts based on what you've just shared with us. I just say in the second session, we'll be really looking at this issue of mainstreaming, scaling up, extending the reach. So some of those key questions, we'll be picking up on those. What are we learning? How can we build on this? So more of that later. For now, I'm going to keep us moving forward. We're now about to break out into 4 parallel sessions. You can see in your screen that we'll be focusing on more social, greener, smarter, and more connected with Levente Poliak, Birgit Georgi, Lucia Scoppelliti, and Simon Chignat, all UIA experts specializing in these policy areas. You've all signed up for one of these topics. The good thing on a virtual session like this is we can put you into your first choice. If 500 of you want to be in a particular room, we don't have to worry about the physical space. So you all have your first choice. Shortly, you'll be automatically transferred to your breakout. If you are not automatically transferred, you'll have a little button which you can press on the screen. It will show you the breakout group options, and you can then press one of those and it will take you to the right place. If that doesn't work, we have a technical team on hand to give you some support, so it should all work smoothly. We have until 25 past 12 to run this session, 25 past 11, sorry, to run this session. So we've got about half an hour, so I won't say anything else. I'll just leave the technical guys to direct us to the right place. Enjoy your discussions, and we'll see you all back here in about 30 minutes. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So yeah, just to say there, we had to squash that a bit. Thanks a lot to our moderators who did a great job. I'll maybe ask the 4 of you to open your cameras. Could you open your Levente and Lucia, Birgit and Simon? Could you just open your cameras so we can see you, and we'll just maybe get some headlines from those conversations. They were very compressed. This is just really a taster. I hope if you were in one of the sessions, you've now got a deep curiosity to hear more about the projects which we were sharing with you. And let's just go around our 4 moderators and maybe get a little bit of feedback from them. Maybe just a couple of the key headlines from those conversations, and then we're going to take a short break. So first of all, Levente, you were kind of keeping a hold of the conversation on more social. Can you just pop your camera on and maybe introduce yourself? Tell us which cities you had, and maybe give us a flavor of the discussion very briefly.
Yes, Eddie, thank you very much. I hope I'm visible. My name is Levente Poliak, and I'm a UIA expert, actually following Athens. And Athens was one of our guests in this More Social Europe session, especially the Curing the Limbo project with Antigone Cotanidi. We had the B-Mincome project from Barcelona, which is a minimum income project with Luis Torrens. And we had Cecily Dagme from Taste in Fives Lille, which is a social inclusion project around food. And I would just tell you a few common things that we found very interesting in the conversation in the project. One thing is that they all experiment with partnerships which go beyond the regular partnerships. So there are always community, civic actors, economic actors, etc., which in a way enables the cities to work with new skills and new actors around all these social inclusion projects. Another thing is that UIA, in a way, enables these cities to experiment, to develop a process which is not, we don't know exactly in the very beginning what's going to happen. There is a trial and error process where there's a feedback into the process to adjust to the circumstances, of course, because with many actors, that's not, you cannot have a guaranteed outcome from the very beginning. But in the end, I think what's really important that in all the 3 projects, it's in a way that the city establishes a service which is, in a way co-managed or at least contributed to by different entities. So it's kind of creating this common field between the city and other social and community actors. And I think this is maybe one of the most important messages that for a more social Europe, we need more collaboration between cities, municipalities, and their community initiatives, social actors, and everybody's on the field.
Thanks, Levente. Great, and that new partnership model, that ability to test and to pilot new ways of doing things, that evolving role of the municipality. We'll be keeping that. There's going to be a recurring theme in our next, and I'm sure in our 3rd webinar. Great to see you, Levente. Thanks a lot. That was really super. All of these breakout sessions will also be recorded. So if you were in social and you were interested in greener, you'll have a chance to dip into all of these when we share the package after this event. Let's jump from more social to greener now. Let's bring Birgit in. Birgit, if you can just pop your camera on so we can see you. Again, just introduce yourself. Remind us which cities you had around the table as UIA cities sharing stories, and maybe a couple of headlines from the discussion you had.
Yes. Yes, I'm Birgit Georgi, and I'm also an UIA expert working with projects in Greater Manchester and in Breda. But today in the discussion, I had projects from Viladecans, from Latti, and from Maribor, which were tackling the areas of energy transition, circular economy, and sustainable urban mobility. All 3 of these have been super interesting, and what I've personally always find interesting is that it is not just about the technical solutions that have innovation, but equally important is innovation in the social area. So these projects produced a lot of additional benefits in other areas like education, like quality of life, and so on. So that also makes them so attractive. Very important for the project has been to engage deeply with the user, deeply with the citizens. Trying also new creative methods to engage them. So like in the case from Viladecans, it's a public-private citizen partnership. And that also leads to really change their mind. People are now talking in the city about energy, now talking about sustainable mobility, or enjoy urban gardens as a spin-off of food self-sufficiency project in Maribor. Also very important is to have a really good partnership, which is flexible, which is willing to discuss things, to solve things. But it's also very important to have this partnership or these partners already when designing the project, when developing it, to bring up all that innovation and include it in the project. So that was it in short, what I could catch.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Birgit. And I see that Alicia from Ville de Cannes has shared some further information on the chat. So, and we asked each of our cities to record a short video in advance, which I'm sure you've seen those. We'll also be including those in the packages afterwards. And as you know, there's lots of information on each of these projects, in fact, on all of the UIA projects on the UIA website. So if your curiosity was triggered, you can dive in and find a lot more by following up the journals and all of the other content. Birgit, thanks a lot. Great to see you. Well done. Great job. Let's move from greener to smarter. Let's bring in Lucia Scopelliti, who's connecting from Milan today. UIA expert. Lucia, great to see you. Again, just introduce yourself. Remind us which cities you've had, and maybe a couple of insights into the discussion you had about Smarter Europe.
Yeah, definitely. Ciao, Eddie. I'm Lucia Scopelliti. I'm a civil servant. I'm a manager of the municipality of Milan, and I'm also the UIA expert for the city of Aveiro. Today, I had 3 cities, Eindhoven, Bilbao, and Aveiro, 3 jobs and skill projects in different phases of development, all addressing the challenges of labor market, but from different point of view, I will say. So in the case of Eindhoven, the challenge was more about re-employment. In the case of Bilbao, was more about reskilling. And in the case of Aveiro, it was more about retaining talent. So these were 3 different shapes. The common ground, probably I would say it was a discussion about job mismatch and the new skills, both soft skills, but also practical skill requested from the labor market today. So coding, robotics, digitalization, this was something of common grounds. And also something interesting that came out from the discussion was the importance of the collaboration of all the players involved in the labor market and the employability challenges with the industries. So the collaboration with the industry in terms of capturing needs, redesigning schemes and patterns. This was something crucial in all the three projects. And I will also say that the UIA added value for these 3 cities was really to having the chance to move forward and to accelerate some processes and some policy challenges already addressed in the 3 municipalities, but still not strong enough to have this push to move forward.
Thanks a lot, Lucia. And again, well done for condensing and compressing the headlines for a very complex topic. Norman's mentioned at the beginning this digital green transition we're all going through, and interesting chat there about the skills implications in terms of the pipeline, how we readjust, how we prepare people for this big shift that's coming. On the subject of digital, let's go to our final 4th moderator, Simon Chignard, a UIA expert who was moderating the conversation about the digital connections. Simon, just pop your camera on, say hi, tell us who is in the room, and a couple of headlines, please.
Okay, can you hear me Now
Yeah,
I think it's working.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I was a moderator for this panel dedicated to a more connected Europe. We had a quite short, to be honest, but interesting discussion with 3 European cities, namely Rennes in France, Szeged in Hungary, and last but not least, Ghent in Belgium. Basically, our discussion was about how could digital contribute to smart mobility and more generally on a more connected Europe. What I think was the most important point on our discussion, actually the first one, is we discussed a lot about how to improve collaboration with private sectors, companies, because it seems to be not so easy for public authorities to have a good collaboration with private sector companies. Still, it's a key to have a more connected cities and a more digital cities. And that was the first one. The second one, which is quite different, is to say we have a lot of discussion about the link between a legal framework, and namely European legal framework, let's say GDPR regulation on data protection, on personal data protection, and how to make this legal framework works for cities. And I think there was here a need to a more maybe deeper discussion between the EU as a regulator and this program based on cities. And last but not least, to make things really short, I will say that to me, these 3 cities prove that UIA is a very good way to experiment and to take risks. And as said Tim Caulfield at the beginning, which is very, very important to enable cities to take risks, because they don't right at the beginning know what the final answer will be. So that's all for me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Simon. Fabulous. And then again, you made a nice link, because in our second webinar, we'll be talking about the UIA assessment, which Tim mentioned earlier. That will be exploring this attitude to risk. This huge question about, what is innovation? Innovation is a pretty subjective theme. So again, we'll be diving more deeply into that in webinar 2 when we're looking at this question of scaling and mainstreaming. For the moment, huge thanks to our moderators, huge thanks to all of our participants. Again, it was a bit squashed, a bit shorter. We've shared the link. Amelie has shared the link to the UIA project on the chat bar, so you'll have a chance afterwards to dive in, and we will be sharing the recordings. For now, we're going to take a break. Don't disappear. Go and stick your head out the window, get some fresh air, have a coffee, have a stretch, do a bit of yoga, whatever you need to do. We will be back here in about 5 minutes at 11:45, where our focus is going to shift to knowledge sharing and knowledge management. Thanks to everybody. Have a short break. See you shortly. Thank you. Bye. So, welcome back, everybody. I've been watering my plants, so I had a bit of fresh air. Hope you had a chance to decompress a little bit. So, welcome back for the second half of the session today. Let's just jump to the next slide. On the second half, we're going to focus on this question of knowledge management, knowledge sharing, all of this rich information and material that we're generating through these UIA projects. How are we packaging these? How are we sharing them? How are we making sure that that knowledge is spread across Europe? Amélie Cousin will just explain a little bit about how this works in practice, and then we'll be hearing from Lara Colini and Irakli Stamos about 2 specific strands of work linked to this kind of key question of knowledge sharing. Amélie, do you want to come back in, pop your camera on, and just give us a big picture?
Yeah. Thank you, Eddie. I'm wearing another hat now, being the presenter of the UIA Knowledge Strategy, and I have very little time to present it, so I will speak a bit faster. I apologize for that. As you've heard from Tim already, the focus of UIA for the next year activities is now on urban knowledge production and its transfer. In this perspective, the UIA Knowledge Management Strategy has been agreed by the European Commission and the interested entity in 2020. It offers us a strategic frame within which we organize knowledge capitalization, dissemination, and transfer activities. So this strategy has three main objectives, as you can see on the screen now. The first one is capturing the knowledge generated by the UIA project. The second one is capturing, analyzing, and disseminating knowledge that is generated across different projects, UIA projects, on common thematic or operational areas. And the third objective is to make this knowledge accessible to all European urban stakeholders. Next slide, please. To achieve this objective, we want to first capture and share two very different but highly complementary dimensions of knowledge, the thematic knowledge and the operational knowledge. We also want to identify mechanisms to facilitate transfer and the reuse of UIA practice in other cities in Europe. But in practical terms, what does this mean? As you can see in the next slide, it means conducting knowledge activities, such as we did in 2020. So the joint activity with URBACT on cities engaging in the right to housing. Laura will tell you more about this ambitious activity in a minute. We also led a capitalization activity on innovation and mobility, aiming at capturing how innovation is transforming mobility cities. Iraklis will present you the main findings later on. And third, we conducted a study together with ECORIS on the monitoring and evaluation approaches supporting innovation intervention. And on that, you will have more information and more presentation in the second webinar next week. Last but not least, in 2020, URBACT launched a call for a pilot mechanism to transfer the most successful UIA experience to other cities in Europe. This call has just ended and the results are soon expected. In 2021, I invite you to discover the final products of these activities and to participate also to the final events we will organize. I also invite you to follow us on in our 2021 journey with one capitalization activity on green and fair transition. So we will build on a selection of urban innovative projects to reflect on how urban authorities can implement just transitions to zero carbon cities. We will also conduct a study on integrated approach and an activity to analyze how COVID has impacted UIA projects in order to understand the potential systemic and long-lasting consequences on how cities operate. So it was a bit fast, I know. I hope I kept the timing. So stay tuned on UIA website for more info. Feel free to contact us on that matter. I hand over to Eddie and Laura for you to get to know more about the finding of our thematic knowledge activities of last year. We cannot hear you, Eddie. You are on mute.
I think I know how to do this by this time. While you were speaking there, Emily, we also shared links to the strategy in the chat bar. So two key things of what we're sharing, what was the content focus and the how. So the how we're doing things. Let's go to Lara, my colleague, both at UIA and URBACT, who's been working on this innovative collaboration between URBACT and the UIA, looking at this kind of key question of right to housing. Lara, you have a presentation. I would encourage people with any questions, comments, jump into the chat. You know how to do this now. Hopefully we'll have a bit of chance to have a chat with Lara at the end and to field some questions. In the meantime, I'm going to close my mic, invite you, Lara, to take the stage. We really look forward to hearing what you have to say to us this morning. Thanks.
Thank you, Eddie, and good morning, everyone. As Ed introduced, I'm an urbanist and I work as a UIA and URBACT expert, and we thought of working around the topic of adequate housing because we want to channel a broader vision and struggle for urban justice. And so we thought that it was a good timing to do that. And we also take on board really the words of Anne Wetzel this morning, the idea of bringing really all together and different initiatives that were around the adequate and affordable housing in Europe. Learning from the experience of URBACT and UIA cities. So next slide, please. Yeah, so one idea that we had of creating this initiative came out of the EU Urban Agenda Partnership on Housing, but also linked to the one on urban poverty and migration. And also we wanted really to give visibility and create an exchange of knowledge among UIA cities and URBACT. Next slide, please. The methodologies that we looked at we created at that time, it was before COVID, and there was not this Zoom idea, but we wanted really to have everything online to make sure that everyone really could participate and open it also to cities beyond the two programs, and also to researchers, activists, policymakers, as well as social movements. So large foremost knowledge that could come together at the same time and exchange around ideas. Next slide, please. Why do we do that? So some of you may be familiar with this data. This is one of the most impressive data that the Housing Exclusion Report done by Fianza has put together, because we also tried in this mechanism to take different knowledges from international organizations as Fianza, Housing Europe, Eurocities, and mix it and take the best out of it. So the situation in Europe is really worrisome, and that was before the COVID. Next slide, please. In terms of homelessness, that was the previous data that the percentage has been raising 70% in a decade. Housing overburden cost has been hitting in different ways member states. Next time, we have also, next slide, please. We have problems related to overcrowding, and then you see these pictures very evident in as well as many member states. Next slide, please. If we talk about rents, we all know that they have been staggering in especially historic tourist city, and the touristicization, next slide please, of the case of Barcelona, we've been talking before, but Amsterdam, Florence as well, quadrupling in a decade the presence. Next time, please. Next slide. I will say time. We also see that the cost of housing have been constantly raising, and the same data will still have it until now, also in the time of COVID. Next slide, please. So what do? We thought of looking at different strategies and different phenomena that were concerning housing policies. So because we really believe that housing is not a commodity, but and has to be taken out of financial market, we thought of looking at different alternatives that could decommodify the housing sector, and one of which is collaborative housing. Next slide, please. And so we invited people that have been next. I just say next because I get stuck and say next slide. Yes, thank you. So we have the Co-Housing Berlin initiative. They have extensive experience in supporting projects in this field. Researchers from TU Delft that could tell about different formats of collaborative housing, as well as cooperative experience from Switzerland. Next, please. We also talk about UIA experiment. Calico is a community land trust, but also an experiment of intergenerational and social mix in one single building, sharing the land among a trust. Very interesting case that I suggest you to look up on UIA website. Next, please. The second conference was dedicated to housing exclusion. We call it No One Left Behind. And we had the chance next, please, to invite the FIANSA, the Federation working on homelessness in Europe, as well as Abbé Pierre Foundation. They shared with us the preview of their annual report and the data and the situation about homelessness in Europe and the homelessness people sleeping rough, the majority of which are, not the majority, but in some cases are people that are that don't have citizenship, they don't have are asylum seeker. Next, please. Sorry, but it's so concentrated. There is so much to say that I have to speed up in 10 minutes. But I really, really want to give you a sense of what is all the amount of information and data and practice that have been followed and presented. So in the same session, we talk about housing first, the model that cities with an URBACT, the roof network, are now experimenting and supported to be implemented. Next, please. We had a special session on housing in COVID, next, in which we invited the OECD, talking about the array of relief measures. We invited the coordinators of the Euro Urban Agenda, next, Eurocities, and International Union of Tenants, really providing hands-on practice on how to reshape local policies to make sure that everyone has access to adequate housing. Next, please. Next, again. The last session was dedicated to form of, if it doesn't exist, the fair finance, but really how to separating the concept of housing as a financial asset to be traded. So next, please, we had a lecture on how the financialization happens in practice, also taking the example in Europe, but we also look at the practical example of how to definancialize local market. And we take the example of UIA, Mataro case study and a cooperative of tenants. We invited the MEP, Kimball Sparentak, who has been sustaining and drafting the report on access to decent and affordable housing, which has been voted in a positive way in January this year and gives an opportunity and hope for better policy in Europe. Next, please. And I'm now concluding. We are organizing a common platform. It is important to say that the two programs work together for the first time. So there will be a unified portal, let's say, that collects articles, podcasts. I haven't talked about the podcast, but we're doing really, really nice work on that. We interviewed Florian Schmidt from the city of Berlin. We interviewed Raquel Ronick, the former UN rapporteur on housing, and everything will be available for cities to exchange practices, but also conveying the message that this can be done, and when political will is there, and also the emergency and the urgency of the COVID show that the most progressive policy we've been fighting for years are possible. So I'm stopping here, and I hope there is some space for questions.
Thanks a lot, Laura. I love my job, but one of the things I hate about my job is rushing people through great content. And that was fantastic content. We've had lots and lots of reactions in the chat bar. Lots of links in there, Laura. We'll be sharing your presentation with people so they can follow these links themselves and dive in a little bit more deeply. I'm keeping an eye on the chat to see if we have specific questions. But I've got maybe one for you about just the overall webinar process, because we're all trying to find new ways of reaching our audiences, trying to package sometimes quite complex, detailed material in ways which are, we've got 2 hours, 2.5 hours today, for example. It's a real pressure. What did you learn from the UIA URBAC webinars personally, professionally? What were the key takeaways for you about how we do this effectively, and what were the headline success factors around that piece of work?
Well, I think there are two aspects that for me are particularly important. One is more political. So the idea that we succeed is really to bring together so many actors at European level And I think it worked well. And I think it was also an experiment for the urban initiative to make sure that this knowledge sharing can work, can be done. We have also, thanks to the EU Urban Agenda, we know each other now. And I think there is more opportunity to create synergies, and very much looking forward to the urban initiative to take these experiences on board. The other part is the quality of content. We had certain moments of really very good content to be shared, but it was a very short time because the attention that we had of people is limited. So I'm also thinking of other ways, other methodologies that we can develop for the future, maybe to have one person or a kind of dialogue interaction with one single topic at a time, rather than packing everything into one. That might be better to get into details and not to stay too superficial. So this presentation was to give a sense and raise your curiosity of what we can do.
Okay, great. And I know you've done that, because I can see, I'm just looking at the chat just now. It's a couple of questions around this kind of structural issue about how we can have an impact where a city's housing market is largely in the hands of the private sector, private rental sector, and also this whole thing about, some of you, I know you know a lot about this financialization, this kind of commodification of property. You know, some people look at this and go, it's just too hard, we can't really shift anything. But you've talked about Airbnb, you've looked at the link with tourism and the impact that's had in our old travel life around you know, markets in cities. Are there things we can do? And maybe, I know that's a very complex question, but maybe a couple of examples of where cities are maybe really kind of making progress and tackling these structural challenges?
Absolutely. I think, I mean, it's evident that government have a big role to play. Obviously, housing policies are national. I mean, there is a movement that now bringing together national governments, but also cities themselves can do a lot. And that's what we wanted really to highlight. The experience of cities like Mataró trying to create the tenants cooperative, the experience of Brussels with the community land trust really taking away land out of the market. It's fundamental. And the creation of cooperatives. So in a certain way, local governments can sustain those mechanisms that are non-market oriented, and making sure that there is also a variety of tenures. We're not saying there has to be only one model, but we want to have a plurality of models. And the filter to make sure that this is adequate is that we have to make a reference in relation to the right to housing, which is enshrined in the documents in Europe and worldwide, the UN and so on. So really considering different types of policies get in the direction of controlling rents, making sure that evictions are not happening. Zero eviction is possible. Nobody has to sleep rough, and all these other very, very important aspects that we are preaching all the time. But the COVID really showed that in a certain way, when political will is there, can be done.
Fantastic. Lara, what great input. Thanks so much for joining us. I see we're sharing links to the work that Lara's talking about and what happens next. So lots there for you to consider. We'll be sharing Lara's content with you afterwards. Please get involved in the conversation if you're not already. Lara, thanks. Fantastic to have you with us. Stay with us, and we'll move on now. We'll shift our focus from housing to another key policy area of mobility. Let's ask Iraklis Stamos. Many of you, if you're involved in UIA, you will know Iraklis because he's a kind of highly visible member of the team. Iraklis, you've been looking at this theme around mobility, and we've already had some of the city conversations today in the breakout around tech, for example, talking about the Ghent project. So again, just share with us, if you will, what's been happening, and then we'll try and find some time for questions at the end. I'm going to stop talking, and the floor is yours.
Great, thanks, Eddie. So welcome everybody from my side as well. I'm Iraklis Stamos. I'm a transportation engineer, but working as a project officer for UIA. So I will be discussing a bit about the joint activity that we have been conducting for the past year with our UIA cities on urban mobility. So next slide, please. And I will just guide you through a bit of on the motivation and why we did that, why now, how we did what we did, and then some of the key findings so far. Previous slide, yeah, thanks. So why did we in the first place decide to work on urban mobility? First, because There is this ongoing stress in cities with population concentrating in urban environments, and we have this estimate from the UN that says that the next 20, 30 years, the population will double in cities. So we feel that the more activities are concentrated in urban context, the more stress this will bring on urban mobility, and then in turn, more congestion, then issues with obviously traffic safety, environmental pollution, and increasing costs, dependency on energy, and so on. So there is an urge for urban authorities to tackle these common challenges, ideally at TU level rather than at city level. Next slide, please. So while we can all argue that this is quite an ongoing situation for many years, why did we decide to act now? Well, first and foremost, because we wanted to support the ongoing efforts that have been done by EU urban authorities in regard to the development of sustainable urban mobility and logistic plans, where they actually try to embed and implement their long-term vision for mobility in their respective cities. But then there's also this European policy level where we would ideally like to contribute, and in that sense, build synergies and support the work of the EU Urban Agenda Partnership on Mobility, and as of very recently, also contribute to the EU Green Deal on climate neutrality through transport, by implementing and investing on policies that reduce transport which emit carbon dioxide through what we say behavioral change or mindset change, by leveraging national public and private investments through collaboration and governance, bringing the private sector in the game, and also through smart traffic management through data utilization. And these three areas that I just mentioned, the behavioral change, the collaboration and governance, and the data, have also formed our sub-themes, and I will talk about it in my next slides. So next slide, please. The main research questions that we tried to answer, and thus the objectives of the whole activity, was for us to understand whether the sole deployment of technological advances can actually bring us to the envisaged results in terms of how we envision mobility for the future, whether innovation in what regards urban mobility needs to be somehow reconceived and reframed outside the usual box, and whether a more broad innovation conceptual context can be more beneficial for EU cities. Practically, the main question that we tried to answer was whether, how and what kind of innovation is necessary for achieving a greener, smarter, and more integrated urban transport of people and goods in the EU today. So next slide, please. How did we do that? Now, as I said, we worked very closely with our UIA cities who have been funded through our second call for proposals in 2017 to implement innovative solutions on urban mobility. The call back then was asking for innovative proposals on efficient infrastructure and mobility and integrated urban transport of people and goods. And what we did was we worked with these 5 projects. We tried to somehow break down what they are doing in 3 cross-cutting themes, as I mentioned: data, collaboration and governance, and behavioral change. And then we work with our cities and try to extract the lessons learned and the main takeaways of the work they are doing based on these cross-cutting themes. Next slide, please. Now, just small things about each of the cross-cutting themes. In what regards data, we try to understand in what way a city can ensure a level playing field for the new fuel, and whether this is the case, and how can it utilize its vast resources in data accessibility for transforming urban mobility. In regard to collaboration and governance, we were sort of wondering what is the potential of collaboration with this ever-growing and transdisciplinary ecosystem in urban mobility, particularly when it comes to the city responsible to implement and deliver urban mobility innovation. And then what would be the exact role of private entities and the industry in this transformation. And finally, we thought that this push and pull approach is as pertinent as ever. So we were wondering, how can a city push actually travelers from individual transport means and pull them to non-motorized transport, mass transport, collective means. So in other words, how to achieve this behavioral and mindset change. So next slide, please. So how, what was the format of our work? So, well, we all started in January last year with a motivation to meet each other and many times throughout the year, but unfortunately this was not possible. So we went obviously online and virtual, and for each of the cross-cutting themes that I mentioned, we were following the same pattern. We were developing some of questions that we were addressing to cities, and with the support of the UIA experts, we were analyzing responses, and we were basically drawing conclusions for all of the cities. And now we expect to actually publish our consolidated findings next week in a report, or probably even this week. Next slide, please. Now, who we are. This is this and the next slide are more reference slides, because I'm sure we're sharing the presentation afterwards, so for people to be able to refer to the projects. So as I said, we have 5 projects. Next slide, please. And then here you can see what each of the projects is actually doing, or what is the, let's say, punchline of each of the projects. I will not go into detail, and I'm happy that we have all of the projects with us today. So next slide, please. I will just now jump to the takeaways. And the structure is based on each of the cross-cutting themes. So I'm starting with the data one. And I can definitely say that after discussing with the cities, data is and will be the new fuel for monitoring travel behavior. Actually, when it comes to data, we understood that it offers all the necessary insights to understand the present and predict how future mobility will look like in terms of transport demand. Also, we found out that when accurate public transport data are available, they result in the development of more efficient services. And in general, a shift towards open data, which means accessible by all, is a plus for sustainable mobility in general, but also in detail in regard to dynamic journey planning. What you see in the slides is we always try to pin each of the main takeaways with one or several of the cities. So it's a more of an evidence-based takeaways. Next slide, please. So in regard to data, again, we also realized that there are new approaches needed when we're talking about dealing with data. So practically we need to adapt when it comes to the conventional collection, handling, maintenance methods that we were following up to a couple of years ago already. Now we are in big data era, which practically means that we also need new ways of validation. Then there are several sources to be utilized. So we're going from the one to many. There is not a single source. There are many of them are even generated from different sources within one unit or a city. So a lot of potential there as well. Then we also found out that GDPR, with all its benefits, it can pose constraints on how a city can collect data and then utilize it in order to offer individualized services. And finally, it's quite costly to get, because investing in new software, sensors, and purchasing data from data owners can require a lot of resources. Next slide, please. So what we need to do when we're utilizing data in this new era, well, we need to set up a trusted data management system for building this common vision for mobility. We need to take into account user feedback. This is the only way and the key in order to build a citizen-centric transport management approach. And finally, we were talking a lot about civil servant 2.0. How we will train the new workforce in order to have the skills to utilize and play with data in that sense. Next slide, please. So when it comes to collaboration and governance, we realize that obviously more collaboration in the urban mobility management will lead to more agile cities. We realized as well that shared governance requires quite some flexibility from the city side. This in turn will increase agility at city level. And then cooperating, bringing in the game the private sector means that cities will even have more freedom to experiment. And then finally, given COVID and the conditions of, given the impact of COVID, cities also reported that they are more able to switch to new collaboration methods because of the impacts brought by COVID. Next slide, please. And now, in general, we also concluded that collaboration creates a common vision and ownership for more sustainable mobility. So we see it as a must. It takes time, but it's the only way to broaden the perspectives. Similar with the collaboration with citizens and stakeholders, it's a long but a stimulating process. And then bringing the citizens, besides the private sector in my previous slide, now bringing the citizens in the game means that we ensure that a project, a system, a service meets the needs of the city, but also it creates quite an interesting political buy-in and accountability on behalf of the city. Next slide, please. Now I'm moving to the last one more slide on governance and collaboration. So successful collaboration needs to include a win-win situation for everybody that is involved. This is an absolute must in order to be able to involve everybody. And practically this means that the private sector will need to see some sort of added value, benefit or gain in order to be part of a project, of a system, of a service. Then there is no one size that fits all. Each project has to be developed and implemented in order to reflect individual context, that is the individual context that is being implemented in. There needs to be high trust that will then again lead to lower level of formalization and drive down costs in this collaboration. Also, we found out that projects that are aligned to city goals, they can be better integrated in the general transport and urban planning strategy of the city. And it's always very beneficial and positive to have an alignment with the national objectives. We saw that in several cases and in many cities. And my last slide, please. Or maybe I think I have another one. In regard to COVID, well, I mean, we notice a change of behavior, a change of mobility behavior, but we are not yet sure whether this is for better or for worse. There is, on the one hand, a greater awareness of the environmental impact of travel choices, and we now need to invest on this better understanding of drivers of chains. We have cities reporting that people do think about changing their travel choices. However, at the same time, due to safety issues, but also restrictions imposed by authorities, there is a large decrease in use of communal transport means and an increase in individual transport. Next slide, please. So, okay, yeah, this is me. This is done. Daddy, I hope I'm still in time.
Thanks a lot, Iraklis. I thought we were going to get through the whole today without any big sound problems, and we had a horrible 90 seconds there, but fingers crossed. Again, lots and lots of rich content there. Your report is about to come out. I guess a question in my head and maybe in other people's heads is, how will you follow up on this work? Because, you know, this is super interesting. It's absolutely of the moment. What are the plans now? This first wave has been done. What happens next?
So I see two levels of next steps. The first one, of course, is the very direct and tangible ones. We will disseminate our report online, and we will share it with our parent DG. We will try to also channel it in the urban partnership. We will talk with the people formulating policy on the EU Green Deal. So we will use it as I said, as an evidence-based coming from the city on how we can change that. Then there are the more, let's say, horizontal lessons to learn on the whole process and the format that we intend to utilize in the next activities that will not be focused on urban mobility per se. But again, there are a lot of takeaways for us as a secretariat on how to do these capitalization activities. Okay, thanks a lot. We've had a few questions about the metropolitan functional urban area issue, which Raffaele picked up. Some issues about gender, which I know that URBACT and UIA has been kind of exploring in terms of this theme. I mean, the last slide you showed, which is where we're in this strange moment where we've kind of pushed the pause button. We can see modal shifts. Some of them not good. Fewer people using public transport, a shift to cars, so walking, cycling more. So it's a mixed picture. Who knows whether this is, you know, everything goes back to normal, in fact, the old normal, or whether we stay with the new normal. So, you know, very much kind of the moment. Iraklis, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you very much. You know, I know that, you know, you'll be following up with some of the questions and comments. So thanks again, super input, really high quality, and thanks again for being with us this morning. Right, we are at the end of our session, folks. I might just ask Amelie to pop her camera on. You and I have been kind of in the thick of it, organising the sessions with our fantastic core team. Amelie, we are at the end of session one. Can you maybe share a couple of headlines for you? Some things you maybe enjoyed or noticed from the session this morning?
Yeah, thank you, Eddie, and everybody for this fantastic webinar. Actually, I really enjoyed this possibility we had to share with you the UIA state of play, especially because we are now at a turning point of our activities, shifting to the knowledge production and transfer. It was also really great to hear about UIA cities' experiences. They have a lot to share with urban stakeholders in Europe. And we saw with all the comments and reaction in the chat that there's a lot of interest. So thank you, by the way, for all your reaction in the chat. According to me, this session was a really good introduction. It clearly set the scene for the next sessions to come. And I hope that all of you will join again next week, the discussion with us.
Fantastic. Thanks, Emily. So we've learned a lot. We can always do things better. We'll be serving all of you at the end of our 3 webinars to get your feedback, because we are all in this massive learning curve these days, as you know. On the screen, you can see the link to where you can access today's content. We'll be emailing you following up, so don't worry, we'll be getting in touch with you proactively. The link to the knowledge management strategy has been shared in the chat bar. It's also there, and we'll be following up with that too. We mentioned social media, and we've had lots of activity on Twitter, I've seen, so that's fantastic. Our next sessions are next Wednesday, where our focus will be this whole question about how we build a bridge between these UIA projects and the wider cohesion policy agenda. So something which Norman's got us started with this morning. So scaling, mainstreaming, adding value. What do we understand is happening? How do we make those connections? How can we do it more effectively? So please join us for that session. And then the following week, we're looking ahead in the future. We had some questions already saying what happens in the next programming period. We'll be sharing some thoughts around that, and also about the EUI, which Norman's also mentioned, so you can see what this new ecosystem looks like and where UIA will fit into that. If you haven't registered, you still can. And if you have colleagues who are interested, please let them know. Otherwise, remains just for me to say thank you very much, everybody. It's been a really pretty rushed session. Apologies, it's been so compacted and so compressed, but I hope you find it useful. We really appreciate you prioritizing your time to join us at a time when we're all digitally saturated. So switch your machines off now, go and get some fresh air, stay in touch, and we'll see you in a week's time. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.